So here with let me start the event, the webinar, because all the experts are now with us, and from GTU, Honorable Vice Chancellor Professor Dr. Naveen Sheth, as well as Professor Dr. K.N. Kher, our registrar sir, is with us. So we are on time, and let me just start my initial address for initiating the webinar. So good afternoon, one and all. It's my honor to be among with you today for this Indo European webinar on revamping international business post COVID-19, a strategic and automation perspective. This webinar is quite unique and important to us because we are organizing jointly with our partner university, that is Varna University of Management, Bulgaria. So GTU is quite we can say wide international network among all the countries. More than 35 foreign universities are our partner, and VUM, that is Varna University of Management, is one of our very active and close partner with whom we are organizing a very huge student mobility program. Around 60 to 70 MBA students visit Varna University of Management every year since last 3 years. Unfortunately, this year we had to cancel our program, that is called IEP, due to COVID. But yes, we have very strong corrections with Varna. And apart from this student mobility and joint research project, this is the new initiative what we are having with UM jointly to be organized as a form of webinar. So before I begin, I must express my deep gratitude to our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Naveen Sheth, for providing the vision and thought to organize this multi-country webinar on a very relevant topic today, that is revamping the international businesses through right set of strategy implementation as well as optimal automation strategies. We have obviously it is our honor that we have invited our respected Honorable Union Minister Sri Mansukh Mandavia, who is a Union Minister for State for Seeping and Union Minister of State for Chemical and Fertilizer Industry, Government of India. But unfortunately, due to the other priorities, he could not join us in this webinar. But he has expressed his deep, we can say, wishes to all of us and all the participants. We have a very eminent industrialist from Gujarat as a guest of honor today. You can see Dr. Ketan Patel is with us. Dr. Patel is an eminent industrialist of Gujarat, and he is a chairman and managing director of Troika Pharmaceuticals, which is a very renowned pharmaceutical industry of India, located at Ahmedabad, Gujarat. Dr. Patel is also a part of GTU family as a member of our board of governance. So we welcome, sir. And now let me briefly, we can say, I should, briefly say a little bit about our today's expert, having said their brief profile. So we have Professor Valina with us. Dr. Valina teaches various modules at undergraduate and master level in the areas of strategic management, entrepreneurship, international business management, and general management. She holds a master degree in business studies from Loughborough University, UK, and a PhD in strategic management from University of Sheffield, UK. And currently, Dr. Valina is associated with Varna University of Management, Bulgaria. So I welcome, madam. Professor Stanislav, he is another professor from VUM, who is one of the experts today. Professor Stanislav is currently the Vice Rector of Research at Varna University of Management, and he holds a PhD degree in Tourism Economics from the University of Economics, Varna. Dr. Stanislav is the Editor-in-Chief of the European Journal of Tourism and Research, and also served in editorial board of more than 30 reputed journals. So I welcome Dr. Stanislav. We have Dr. Virupaksha Mr. Virupaksha as the General Manager of Boss Rexall India Private Limited. Sir is basically like he has been heading the marketing along with the partner and distribution segment management, emerging technologies, training and didactic system with Boss Rexall India Private Limited since last 2 years, having a base at Bengaluru, India. He was previously holding various responsibilities as leading automation MNCs, handling key responsibilities as country business manager, business lead at Asia Pacific region. And Mr. Virupakshapa graduated in electrical and electronics engineering from Mysore University in 1991, followed with a couple of management studies from Indian Institute, Kashipur, and along with like he has many other achievements in his professional journey. So we welcome you, sir, as one of the experts today. And the fourth expert with us is Dr. Sheetal Jayantilal. So Professor Sheetal is a professor and head of School of Economics and Management at Portuguese University in Porto, Portugal. She is holding, various, we can say, important positions in her own university as well as in some, other peer organizations. Professor Sheetal is also holding a position as an adjunct professor in GTU's PhD program, and he is supervising, few students of GTU who are pursuing their PhD in management studies. And yes, we are fortunate to have her in last December 2019 here in one of the research or evaluation program for our PhD student. So this is a little bit brief about our all the experts. And now with this, I would invite our registrar sir, Dr. K.N. Kher, for formal welcome address to all. Sir, please.
Good afternoon to all. It's my immense pleasure to welcome all of you in today's webinar. GTU has always been a front runner in providing excellence in the academic, industries, concept, and social responsibilities. In last 2 months of lockdown due to COVID-19, we have tried our best to keep the spirit of learning live and vibrant. We have organized more than 100 webinars on the various topics from March to end. In the series of the webinar at GTU, today's webinar is very special as it's truly international in nature. We have 4 expert speakers from 3 different countries and more than 650 participants from India, Germany, Bulgaria, and Russia. In today's seminar, it's our honor to have Dr. Ketan Bhai Patel, Chairman and Managing Director of Troika Pharmaceuticals Limited, and our respected BOG member as a guest of honor of today's webinar. It is also our immense pleasure that our Honorable Vice Chancellor Sri Professor Naveen Seth sir is also with us. It's my privilege to welcome all 4 experts of today's webinars. Professor Voilina, Professor Varna University of Management, Bulgaria, Professor Stanival, Professor in Varna University of Management, Bulgaria, Mr. Virupaksha, General Manager, Boss India Private Limited, Professor Sheetal Jayantilal, Professor and Head, School of Economics and Management of Portuguese University and Portugal. We are confident that our talks shall provide the new pathway to our management, faculties, students, and also the industry people on the right strategy to be followed in international business post-COVID-19. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for your formal welcome address to all expert as well as the audience. Now, moving forward, we have a very eminent academician as well as administrator, Professor Dr. Naveen Sheth, Honorable Vice Chancellor of GTU with us. So, I request Honorable Sir to give the opening remarks to the webinar. Please, sir.
Namaskar. Very good morning to my European participants and good afternoon to the Indian participants. So I'm happy to welcome here at the webinar jointly organized by the Gujarat Technological University and the Varna University of the Management, Bulgaria. I heartily welcome the today's chief guest, Dr. Ketan Bhai Patel, our BOC member. I also welcome the experts for the today's webinar. So, Professor Violina, Professor Stanislav, Professor Virupakshpa, Professor Shital. I also welcome our registrar, Dr. K.N. Kher, Dr. Keyur Darji, Dr. Pankaj Patel, and other organizing members of the GTU, and all participants from globally. So we all here in a very special conditions where most of the countries were locked down for in the month of March, April, and slowly now it is unlocked. So world is facing humanity's biggest crisis since World War II. Almost every country has been affected by the devastating coronavirus disease. An outbreak from the China has gone everywhere. In the last few months, corona epicenter has been shifted from China to Europe, to United States, and now to the Asian countries. Till date, means the data from yesterday at 11 p.m., 7.4 million people had been affected by COVID-19 and about 4,17,000 people had been died worldwide. Indirectly, billions of people have been suffering from the impact of the global pandemic COVID-19. Undoubtedly, this coronavirus has put the world economy at a major risk. Coronavirus remains the economic foundations of world trade. Commentators, experts have identified this outbreak as an outcome of hyper-globalization or starting of deglobalization. However, the world is going to face recession and the global losses, according to some commentators, may exceed the World War I and II combined. At the same time, the falling world price of crude oil has added further anxiety. Several estimates are now available on the economic loss and post-COVID-19 growth path, and most of the estimates show that the world is already in an economic crisis. So it is a global challenge and a global response is called for. Unlike the 2007-8 global financial crisis, it is primarily a health crisis which has given birth to an economic shock. Asian and European countries, they have convened a high-level video conference on 20th March 2020 to discuss the COVID-19 situation. ASEAN and EU agreed to continue working closely together to mitigate the impact of COVID-19, including on social and economic development. They agreed to enhance the exchange and cooperation moving forward with a view to further regular exchange between the official and experts from ASEAN and EU on dealing with the issue. At the same time, countries shall undertake reforms to strengthen the digital economy and e-commerce, not only to manage the pandemic, but also to facilitate the trade. Trade barriers should not be allowed to happen in the trade goods and services, particularly those feed the health science. The world is passing through a great uncertainty. Undoubtedly, the coronavirus has put the world economy at a major risk. Coronavirus revenge the economic foundations of world trade. According to the WTO, the world trade is expected to fall by between 13% to 32% in 2020, thereby indicating the world economy is expected to face recession. Trade cannot flourish without commensurate the policies to revive the economy, a combination of fiscal, monetary, and trade policy measures. Thus, it is required to revive the economy and trade in these uncertain times. I am sure the world will come out of the crisis and give birth to a new phase of an improved and inclusive world. Although India has managed well till date containing the spread of the virus, the COVID-19 pandemic has already disrupted the normal economic activity and life in our country. India's trade has been severely impacted. People have a sudden loss of their income, causing a major drop in demand. To rescue the economy, India has announced impressive fiscal and monetary stimulus packages by our Prime Minister Shri Narendra Bhai Modi. So it's a important issue we have discussed today in this webinar. So definitely this webinar will be most useful to not only to India and European countries, but to the globally. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for your very informative, insights and opening remark and setting up the stage for this international webinar rightly, with the particular, theme of this webinar. So with this, now I would request our chief guest of today, Dr. Ketan Patel, for his valuable inputs as well as observation with respect to today's theme, and enlighten us for we can say this particular topic, that how to revamp the international business in today's scenario. Please, sir, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Berji. Good morning to all the experts from Europe, and good afternoon to those from India. Indeed, we are facing an extremely challenging, possibly one of its kind for all of us, crisis which has completely decimated the economy. And therefore, there are challenges. And for many streams of business, like, for example, pharmaceutical manufacturing, in spite of COVID, the show has to go on, because if the medications don't remain available, there could be other complications. So I'll talk from my experience of how the challenges could be faced. Two major, I think the biggest aspect of facing the challenge of COVID is to educate the people who are going to work for you, for your organization. Lots and lots is coming out in the media, but then as you normally observe, abundant of information is not always read, and if it is read, it is not always assimilated. So people tend to be casual. And the contagious nature of the COVID virus is something which has to be driven home into the minds of your employees if your enterprise or your organization is to continue performing and working and functioning, even if not at 100% capacity, at least at 60 to 75% capacity. And that is what I believe is the only way to meet the challenge of continuing to function. Because there's also another harsh reality which all of us have to bear in mind, and that is the vaccine is not going to happen very soon. The antiviral drugs, we are not sure. Yes, Russia has come out with a clinical trial of favipiravir, which supposedly claims that in 4 days, the viral load is dramatically reduced. But whether that's going to be true or not, only time will tell. So in the meantime, what's going to happen is that we will have to live with COVID. And therefore, if we have to live with COVID, the first thing that we need to do to keep the companies working, to keep the organizations working, is to educate every single person who is closely associated with your organization. Uh, I mean, I'll just give a brief outline of what could be done. The first thing that we need to do is what we've done is to have created a task force, a small group of people who creates all the procedures in detail and then drives home those details into the minds of every employee by educating them in small groups. The education is predominantly about how COVID spreads. That is the most important thing to understand. People wear masks and they think they're immune to COVID. But that's not true. There are so many precautions to be taken about how to wear the mask correctly. And then also the major exposure happens through surfaces. So how does your employee avoid contamination through surfaces? And the third most important part, which is the most difficult actually, is once the person is out of your premises, he goes home. Then is a completely different environment. There is a tendency to socialize because people feel that if I have worn a mask, it's fine. But then the contamination through surfaces is forgotten. If you're living in an apartment and you've got an elevator or lift, I mean, if someone in the building has got COVID, then if he's going to touch any surface, that surface is going to be contaminated. So how to, I mean, you may always have a surface contamination in your hand, but how to ensure that it doesn't touch the two areas, mouth and the nose, from where COVID enters. And if we do this, then, and we've also created an awareness about responsibility, because at the end of the day, it is a responsibility. In our organization, we had 14 episodes of COVID in a strength of about 1,000 people who work in 3 different plants in 3 different locations. One plant had no COVID because that whole region has a very low incidence. But the 2 plants in this part of the country, Gujarat, we had total of 14 incidences. Each time the incidences were brought from home. And of course, because the premises, it's very easy to sanitize the premises by spraying, etc. But it's not possible. I mean, if you don't be aware of the fact that the persons coming from home are going to bring it in, then there's going to be trouble, because one person is going to be capable of infecting between 4 to 6 to 8 people who are going to work around him. So what we've done is that we have sensitized our people extremely to be responsible towards their colleagues. Because the problem is that if I come with COVID as an irresponsible individual into the plant, then I'm going to infect my other colleagues. So I better take care when I am at home to avoid getting contaminated. Second thing is we've kept a voluntary disclosure procedure that everybody who enters, he discloses that I am not aware of anybody in my apartment complex or in my family having acquired COVID. So that even by accident, if he has forgotten that someone in his society or in his apartment block had COVID and he accidentally enters, he will be jolted out. He's reminded that if you're aware, please go home. You can go on leave. It's going to be a paid leave anyways. We pay salaries for the leaves of this kind. The third thing at the entry point is that the government of India declares the areas which are containment zones. So they are tracked closely by our task force. And from the address of the employee, we know that today these many employees, even if they come up to the plant, they will not be allowed to enter. So if you do this much, if you allow the right people to enter, at least you're considerably protected. So as I was talking to you, we have had 14 cases and none of them has had any fatality. And in fact, out of the 14, we had 8 cases who had very, very mild symptoms. And the rest of the 6 had slightly higher symptoms, but none turned fatal. So the second thing which we did was that, COVID actually, if you look at it, it's virus, it's highly contagious, but it gives you a window of opportunity from the time it enters your body and the time it manifests in a very serious manner. That's a window of about 6 to 10 days. that if I catch an infection today, it may take me 6 to 10 days for it to become really violent and virulent. So what we do is that we have developed our own palliative care protocol for all our employees. So we made kits of, say, like nutrients like vitamin C, zinc, which is supposed to play a very big role in the virus being able to penetrate the cell. So vitamin C, zinc, vitamin D3 is also very much well known to improve the immune defense system. Then our good old turmeric, which is a very popular antibacterial, antimicrobial in India. 5, 6 items we have made a kit and we have dispensed to all our. Selenium is another trace element. So every employee of ours every day takes one of these doses, and we've also prescribed some breathing exercises for the people so that we try to pep them up and engage them into keeping their immune systems robust. So that could possibly one of the reasons why none of the cases became very serious. All of them have recovered. A few had very mild symptoms, and the rest had little bit of higher symptoms like fever for 4 days. But none of them actually kind of graduated into respiratory distress. So that's palliative care is another thing. And then about, of course, the production itself or whatever activity you're doing, you have to ensure social distancing. So if you don't ensure that, there have been incidences in this very city where companies have had up to 80 cases of COVID and 6 people died in one company. And then later we came to know that the social distancing is not practiced in the spirit. It has to be practiced in the spirit. For example, if we are transporting our employees to the plant, then the first thing we did is that we doubled the number of vehicles because that was the only way social distancing was possible. So, and in plants also what we've done is some of the activities have been staggered into shifts so that at one point of time in one room, the people are always at least 5, 6 feet away from each other. And I think this has become life now. And our task force constantly, there are 83 checkpoints every day, which are checked by the task force to ensure compliance to each of those checkpoints. And this has been started since March. So now it's April, May, June. So it's become life. And as I told you, for another 5, 6 months, we will have to do it. So the only way the business challenge can be faced is to inculcate a culture of living differently, living on a high alert all the time, and making that a habit so that then you no longer need to be on a high alert. And the third and the last thing is possibly automation, but then automation will help, but you can't overnight buy machines. Today, there's no supply of machinery. In fact, ancillary supplies are really disturbed because if ancillary companies are smaller, they're not able to do these things in an organized manner. And therefore, automation, etc., would be something for the long term to reduce the number of employees, etc. But I believe that what is applicable to everybody is to inculcate a culture wherein people automatically and inherently function in a manner to avoid getting contaminated with COVID. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for your very practical as well as valuable insights, specifically for the businesses and the industry people, because it is the places.
All organizations, actually for all organizations, not just
all,
business.
yeah, organizations too, because ultimately that drives the economical activity throughout the countries, and which is very important to have this practical and live we can say inputs so that everybody can learn and follow. So herewith I would now invite our director of the School of Management Studies, Dr. Pankaj Patel, for vote of thanks to end this inaugural session. Please.
Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Naveen Seth, today's chief guest of the function, Dr. Ketan Patel, today's experts from Bulgaria, Portugal, and Bangalore, and Registrar of Gujarat Technological University, Dr. Khen Kher, and my colleagues of GTU. On behalf of GTU, I propose this vote of thanks to today's esteemed chief guest, Dr. Ketan Patel, Chairman and MD of Troika Pharmaceutical Limited and member of Board of Governors of Gujarat Technological University. Sir, your words of wisdom related to this Indo European webinar on revamping international business post COVID-19, a strategic and automation perspective, will remain in our memory for long and inspire us. Your suggestions on how to improve business, especially pharmaceutical business, through education are very much pragmatic and realistic and need of the day. How to avoid surface contamination and how to be responsible are also very good suggestions to fight this coronavirus. I also thank our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Sir, Professor Dr. Navin Sheth, who has always motivated and directed us for such initiatives. I also thank the experts of webinar from Bulgaria, Dr. Violina and Dr. Ivanov and Dr. Sital from Portugal and Mr. Virupaksa from Boss Rexroth India Limited for giving their consent for this particular webinar. I also thank the Registrar of GTU, Dr. K.N. Kher, for his guidance in arranging this particular webinar. I also thank all the participants, namely the faculty members and students of various institutions and practitioners of international business for their kind presence in this webinar. And last but not least, I thank my colleagues of Department of International Relations at Gujarat Technological University for scheduling this particular webinar. Thank you.
So here we are now we can say concluding our inaugural session, and okay. So with this now, in the presence of our we can say our authorities, Honorable Vice Chancellor Sir and Registrar Sir, I now invite our first expert or speaker of the today, Professor Valina, to we can say deliver her speech on this particular topic. As such, though the main theme of the webinar is like the Indo European webinar on revamping the international business post COVID-19 as a strategic and automation perspective, but as for all the four experts are having their own expertise basically on the different segment and the sectors. So all the four experts will deliver their speech on the various different topics. So Professor Valina is going to have her address on the strategic challenges for international companies in post-COVID world. So over to you, Professor Valina. You may start, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me. We certainly live in very challenging times, but crises also create new possibilities. So really the question for today is what will it take for businesses to reinvent themselves and take advantages of these new possibilities. I'd like to share with you some ideas about how I see the new strategic challenges for businesses and what are the actions which they might need to take in the future. It is probably safe to assume that the past environment in which international businesses operated is not going to be a reliable predictor when companies make decisions about their future. So what are the options for a more radical approach for revamping the international business? I don't promise to have the perfect answers, but only some ideas where to start from. First, an option for businesses might be to rely more and play more on their strengths rather than react to the unpredictable environment. That will require asking different kinds of questions, such as how do you need to change to get through this, rather than how to preserve what we have, which might be impossible. And the second one is playing constraints, in my opinion, will require a major shift in current views about leadership. We in Europe don't talk enough about how important leadership is. And the issues of leadership seems to be on the fences of conversations about business strategy. So can the current thinking about business strategy inform companies about their new strategies which they'll need? We tend to consider business strategy as a set of choices which companies make about their future and what it takes to act on these choices. And the process starts with the aspirations of the companies in terms of what they would like to achieve. But then the rest of the choices are based on understanding what the competition is doing or not doing. So the process is data-driven, it's analytical, and in essence, it's a reactive process. It assumes predictability of the competitive environment, which seems to serve almost as an engine informing and driving the rest of the choices about how to mobilize internal resources. The problem right now is that it's difficult to make good data-driven decisions in absence of good data about the environment. So it seems that an essential component of how companies make decisions about their strategy is going to be unreliable, at least for some time. Perhaps the next question is, can we borrow some ideas from past business crises and what was learned then? And of course, not in terms of applying all the recipes, but in terms of the key lessons, what was learned. And there wasn't a global crisis in our living memories, which was so sudden and with such magnitude. But there were events which reshaped competition, and the invention of internet was such an event. Some international and powerful companies at that time have faded away because they could not adapt to the environment, and others have risen to greatness. Jim Collins and Morten Hansen, the authors of one of the most insightful studies reflecting on that period, said that following the belief that leading in a fast world always requires fast decisions and fast actions, it's a good way to get killed. So probably in the next month or year, couple of years, when executives think about what changes to make, probably they need to pause for a while before making any irreversible changes. So what were the key lessons? Why some companies were thriving in that period and others faded away? There seems to be an agreement about three factors. The first one is a strong sense of purpose. The second, the way leaders lead and the way they build their companies. And the third one is how people behave. Everything else, such as the specific strategies, the technology, the markets which these companies serve, is a result of these three factors. So the main conclusion is that doing well in an unpredictable environment is due to leadership and behavior. And in addition, the success was attributed to three additional factors. The first one was clarity about what companies were best at, and they built it on that. The second, consistency of action, meaning that once decided what opportunities to pursue, companies took consistent actions rather than spreading efforts in various directions. And the final one, financial discipline, meaning very careful risk assessment, building cash reserves and buffers if sudden changes occur. And that means sustainable business models. So what some of these lessons learned and how the European businesses behaved so far? Based on the level of impact of the crisis, the businesses found themselves broadly in three groups. The first group, they are thriving, and for understandable reasons, the food retailers, supermarket chains, online companies, technology companies, and they were rewarded with, at least some of them, with skyrocketing share prices. We've relied on them during the lockdown. And the third group, really by the luck of the draw, they find themselves closed almost the next day in travel, hospitality, tourism, consumer-facing industries. But I'd like to focus on the middle group, because this is the largest group. Their immediate actions can give some indications about how prepared businesses are to deal with crisis. These companies, they were in quagmire, very difficult situation, because many of them worked with reduced capacity and faced major disruptions in their supply chains. Of course, there were some shining examples amongst these companies which managed to adapt very quickly to the new challenges. But not all of them. I mean, the companies which adapted were, it seems like, in the minorities. We've observed two main patterns about how the rest were coping with the situation. And the first one was that there was an immediate concern about financial survival. And this was amongst companies, many of them large companies, multinational, which enjoyed healthy growth and very healthy return on investments for quite a few years. So this is pointing to limited sustainability and shock resistance built in their business models. And that unfortunately points to systemic failures. The second one was many executives were simply reacting to the events. In many cases, that transpired in almost immediate and mass layoffs of staff, meaning that labor was seen as a cost and not as a creative potential needed during the recovery. And this points to deficiency in leadership behavior. Regrettably indicates that the lessons from the previous events, which disrupted the competitive environment, were not learned by many businesses. The International Institute for Management Development in Switzerland just published the results of a study based on nearly 600 executives of companies of various sizes, but predominantly large companies, and some of them with more than 50,000 employees. And the purpose of the study was how these companies were coping with the changes, but also how they were seeing the strategic opportunities in the next 6 months and beyond. And as you see on this table, and it's not surprising that the immediate concerns about the loss of revenues and cash flow difficulties, and down the list of the requirement for new capabilities or loss of such, and the damage in culture. It is concerning, however, that they don't see much change required after 6 months. And still capabilities and organizational culture continue to be lower in the list of priorities. And these are precisely the sources of strengths for companies. So that unfortunately points out that executives are more attuned to the bottom line and less attuned to shifts in the market that will require new capabilities. So the questions for many international businesses now is how to move from survival mode to reinvention mode. And that will definitely require a new mindset. And in the words of one of the leadership gurus, Simon Sinek, Many companies have fundamental problems because they consider business as sport. According to the game theory, there are two types of games, infinite and finite games. The infinite games are the games of sport. The players are known, they clear rules, and there are winners and losers at the end. But the infinite games are quite different, and business is by definition an infinite game. You're there for the long haul. There are known and unknown competitors, there are no agreed upon rules, and there is no such thing as a complete winner. But then looking at the rhetoric of some executives, and there seems to be a preoccupation with short-term financial results. And the results of the survey suggest many intend to continue in the same manner, mixing the long-term game with short-term objectives. So where to look for inspirations? And it's difficult at that point to really suggest some solution, very practical advice for companies. But then an inspiration might come from a very unlikely place. And these are the social enterprises. We don't talk enough about them, and some of them are incredibly impactful. Now, why I'm giving this as a kind of inspiration, they've always operated in a rather hostile environment. Well, they are focusing on challenges which governments and powerful and wealthy businesses could not resolve. And almost by definition, they operate with very limited resources. A few months ago, at an event in London, Professor Mohammed Yanis, the founder of Griman Bank for the Poor, he's also a Nobel Peace Prize winner, he made a very interesting observation. He compared social enterprises to science fiction movies. Because both need to rely on imagination as productive resource. The founders of social enterprises need to imagine solutions to the problems which don't exist, because if they existed, the government probably would have solved the issues. And after that, after imagining solutions to the problems, they usually trace their steps back in order to find a practical approach forward. Now, the good thing about imagination, Professor Yanis said that it's a boundless resource and everybody has the capacity to imagine. Also, it's a free, productive resource. So when international businesses think about their reinvention in the following months, they might use a great deal more of this absolutely free productive resource and mix it with the cool logic of strategizing. For that, of course, they will need a new inspirational and visionary leadership, like the leadership of many of the social enterprises. Finally, my top 5 suggestions only for the way forward. The first is for company to identify their strengths and be willing to change course completely, because this might be the only option. The second one is understand what is likely to change about the macro and microeconomic trends, not the immediate competitors, because the immediate competitors may not be around. The third one is envision your future. New vision needs to substitute the data-driven approach informing strategy. And that will require leaders with a different mindset. Fourth, develop a strategy to walk back this envisioned future to today that might require new capabilities. The advantages of this approach is that it is it frees from the limitations of how things were done up to this point. And the final one, rally the team around the vision. As the process is going to be long, difficult, and painful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Verlina. I think you have given very precisely and briefly the roadmap for the strategic leadership, specifically emphasizing on the strategic leadership for the organization in the current scenario. And yes, as a we can say management fraternity professional as well as academician, I absolutely agree with you because looking at the crisis of today and looking at the future, consequences and the environment, this we can say inputs and the strategies would be definitely, we can say very helpful and it would be working. So thank you very much. Now, I would like to invite our second expert and the speaker of today, Professor Ivanov. Professor Ivanov would be speaking on the topic that is COVID-19 as a driver for automation from the economical perspective. So over to you, Professor Ivanov, please.
Thank you so much. It is my great honor to participate in this webinar. Congratulations to the organizers and thank you all participants for taking part in this webinar. When I was preparing my presentation, I was thinking about all the different aspects of the impact of COVID-19 on businesses. And in the presentation that we just saw, Violina summarized them very well. That's why I decided to focus more on the impacts on the tourism and hospitality industry and how COVID-19 is a driver of automation and robotization within that industry. Many of the issues that are discussed here, that I shall discuss, are practically applicable for other consumer-facing industries as well. So you already heard about me. Besides editor-in-chief of the European Journal of Tourism Research, also I recently launched a new journal, Robonomics, the Journal of the Automated Economy. So please consider this journal for your submission. This presentation is based on two preprints, which are freely available on these two links. They deal with the biosecurity automation technologies and how these technologies help companies from tourism and hospitality be more sustainable and resilient. And another paper on service robots as a tool for physical distancing, which was practically accepted just a few days ago. I'm sure that we have all seen this cartoon on social media. It turns out that no government strategies, no CEO leadership skills or whatever were more powerful than COVID-19 in terms of digital transformation of companies. Practically overnight, many companies, not only in tourism and hospitality, but also in many other industries, had to change their business models and to acknowledge the importance of digital technologies. So if we're looking about the positive outcomes of the COVID-19 pandemic, definitely the push of the digital transformation is probably the most important one. So what about tourism and hospitality? Definitely the first thing that we shall observe is that probably the changes of the habits of travelers will change. Health concerns in choosing a destination or service provider. People will be much more concerned about the health security of the destination and of the hotels, restaurants that they visit. In practical terms, this means that cleanliness should probably be visible part of the product. Previously, cleaning of facilities, of rooms, was done in a more hidden way, in a way that was not quite visible to the tourists. But probably now, hotels, restaurants, airports, they will need to make it like a theater, like customers to see that these companies are doing a lot in order to protect their health. But also perceptions of overcrowding. Previously, some destinations were not considered quite crowded, but probably this thing may change in the future. And we can have a lower limit, lower perceptions regarding what is overcrowded and what not. What about handshakes? Will this ritual of hospitality be changed? And will wearing masks by tourists when they travel be the new normal? Or will there be a shift of preferences from high-touch services to high-tech services? What I can say is that we do not know yet. There are many things written on the topic, and a lot of research done, but we will know this probably in a year from now, when the crisis is over and after we see the actual consequences of it. But not only about the changing habits of travelers. Definitely, there are some issues that will be raised. First, this is the increased biosecurity awareness of business owners, managers, and hotel employees. Some companies now have, how to say, a more flexible perception about health, safety, security, biosecurity, but probably this needs to be changed. And not only changed, companies will need to be proactive in their way of thinking, not reactive. Proactive in terms of developing protocols, adopting protocols in order to limit the interactions from humans, and probably this will mean incorporation of automation technologies to to mitigate the consequences of such outbreaks. Large hotel corporations were quick to offer such solutions. They rewrote their health and safety standards and the procedures for the housekeeping department. And now this is, for example, a screenshot of the rules of Hilton, which they published recently. And what they say that there are 10 places within the room that need to special attention in terms of cleanness. So practically, the customer might not see that these things are cleaned, but the companies are publishing this on their websites, and of course this will be cleaned, but this becomes visible part of the product. But also some hotels already started using robots to kill viruses with ultraviolet light in order to clean the rooms. The new health and safety rules that hotel chains incorporate practically increase the time that is necessary to clean rooms. This means that they will need more staff in order to clean the rooms, which will mean higher costs. But also there's no guarantee that everything will be cleaned properly. So the use of robots with ultraviolet light, which eliminate 99.99% of the viruses in the room, will help hotels and also will speed up the process. But also, companies will think about the use of digital assistants. For example, installing echo devices with Alexa software from Amazon in their hotel rooms, so that customers can manage the different devices in the hotel with Alexa, with voice activated technology, or they can order room service and whatever without the need to touch any surfaces. And these are not quite expensive. also, companies may use mobile keys. These are mobile applications which can be used to unlock and lock the hotel room, or kiosks, also for check-in, check-out, or they can use room service robots like this one, which was introduced in one of the hotels in Bulgaria a few months ago. Or we can have chatbots for facilitating the communication between the hotel, the travel agency, the airport, and the customers. Okay, these are the technologies, but there are also other things which facilitate the adoption of these technologies in tourism and hospitality. What we can see is that many employees who are fired from tourism and hospitality companies due to the pandemic, they may not want to return to the same employer. They may also prefer to work in another industry for simple reason, because they saw what is the vulnerability of tourism and hospitality to such pandemics. How easy is to lock down, to close the operations of hotels, restaurants, airports, and how vulnerable their job positions are. But also, it is possible that immigrant workers, they may not be able to obtain visas easily, and they may be subject to compulsory quarantine when they enter back the country. This means that practically the labor supply in tourism and hospitality after the pandemic may shrink, and we may see fewer people working in tourism and hospitality or willing to work in tourism and hospitality than previously. This means that companies will be forced to use automation technologies regardless whether they want it or not. And as an example of this, this is a screenshot just a week after the number of cases of COVID-19 in the US started to significantly increase. Marriott Hilton and other hotel corporations, they were the first to lay off employees. So COVID-19 also challenged the corporate social responsibility claims of companies. Large corporations, they are very proud of their corporate social responsibility programs and how much they care for their employees. However, what we saw is that they were the first to fire employees, among the first to fire employees, when they saw how their bookings will decrease in the future. And they had reputational losses that were inevitable. So practically, these companies will consider automation as a way to minimize their dependence on human labor, but also to avoid potential future layoffs and negative word of mouth. Also, what we saw is that the COVID-19 pandemic will force owners and managers of those companies that survived to look for ways to decrease their fixed costs. Because during the pandemic, they had very higher expenses, although although the hotels and restaurants were closed. This is because they are fixed, because of their high fixed costs. And after the pandemic, they shall be looking for ways to decrease. Of course, decreasing the fixed costs, one way to do it is to work with fewer employees. And the high level of automation allows the company to work with fewer employees, and then a company compared to a company with no automation. This means that a company with high level of automation will have lower labor costs and also lower fixed costs. And in case of future such pandemics, the company will not need to fire many employees, if any employees, just because they will have lower costs. But also, from an accounting perspective, automation technologies, they decrease the cash outflows of the company, because the expenses that you need to make will be lower. And also, this means that
is less.
The companies will remain more liquid and they will have the financial resources to cover their liabilities. And also, companies with high level of automation do not need to deal with rigid labor laws and negative publicity when they fire employees during a pandemic. I mentioned this especially for, I don't know how it is the situation in India, but within Europe, labor laws are very rigid, and often it's very difficult to fire employees, and that's why some companies prefer not to hire people, not to work with fewer employees in order to avoid the future headaches they might have when they need to fire some of them. And also, the legislation in the post-viral world might change. Companies may be forced to use biometric technologies for measuring, for example, the temperature of employees and tourists. Also, legislation may require the companies to decrease their service capacity. For example, currently in Bulgaria, restaurants, hotels, cinemas, etc., they can work at 50% capacity. Which means that they will have fewer customers than previously. So fewer seats in restaurants, fewer guests, and all these measures, they are likely to add on costs for running the business. And when you increase the costs for running the business, companies have economic stimuli to automate many tasks. For example, in biometrics, they were already introduced in some airports in the UK. Other companies are using face recognition technology for measuring temperature, and some of them are also even testing these technologies for payments. Also, companies are using automation for physical distancing. So, for example, using robots to deliver pizza or something else. But besides the physical distancing, we should not forget about the social connectedness, because we are social beings and our psychological and social health is also important. So we can use automation technologies to entertain people as well. Also, automation technologies provide competitive advantages for companies in the post-viral world, and because customers and employees may feel more secure. And they're the tool for moving from high-tech to high-tech services. And also, companies may use chatbots, wearable, mobile, implanted devices to inform guests about the environment, whether it is safe or not, and how likely it is to be infected. And another thing which may see in the future, this is avatar tourism. So that when we have closed borders, when stopped flights, when people cannot travel, you can connect to in real time to a robot that is located in a destination, and you control the robot from your home country, but the robot moves in the destination. Of course, this is in at least 10 years from now, but this is already envisioned. And of course, we have to consider we have to use technologies wisely, because they provide opportunities, but we need to utilize these opportunities correctly. So if you want to learn more about robots, artificial intelligence, and service automation, this is the book for you. Thank you so much, and I'm available for your questions.
Thank you very much, Professor Vano. I think your perspective on the automation, specifically with respect to the tourism and hospitality industry, would definitely, like, obviously I understand, like, Bulgaria being a hospitality and tourism based country, would have much implication of your research and your inputs. But yes, in India also, definitely there are so many destinations where the entire economy is based on the hospitality and tourism. And I understand that it is not only the hospitality and tourism industry, but this would be maybe a future of many industries, because ultimately restaurants, we can say leisure activities and everything is there everywhere. So I think your input would be definitely quite helpful to the audience and even the industry people. And with this now, let me move further to invite our next speaker, Mr. Virupakshapa. Uh, Sir is basically a general manager in the very reputed multinational company that is Bosch Rexroth India Private Limited. And Bosch is having multiple plant and facilities like in Europe as well as across the world. And in India, yes, in Ahmedabad also we have very sophisticated state-of-art plant. And just to add, before I we can say hand over the mic to sir, let me share that GTU, like Bosch being a technology-based company, is having also a very good social responsibilities activities. And as a part of that, they have the academic wing who ultimately connect with the universities and the technological institution to establish the center of excellences. So I can say very proudly that in GTU, the first center of excellence in the automation and pneumatic was established in cooperation with Bosch Rexroth India, and the center is running very successfully almost since last 4 to 5 years, and many students and faculties are taking a benefit, and it is a very state-of-art center of excellence what we have in collaboration with Bosch. So with this, now over to you, sir, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for giving this opportunity for us to present. Appreciate the collaboration between the GTU and Bosch Rexroth India. Okay, and I would appreciate my earlier speakers set a very well platform for this to take off very well. We will be able to connect very well on the current situation. Example, we started with Mr. Patel telling about what they have been doing in their industry as a care, preventive care, and how do they manage their employees. I think that's a very good learning. In fact, in our facilities also, we are doing same or much more, not only the factory, even across the other offices. Then from Portugal University, I had the presentation from both the presenters. It was very well connected from the strategy aspect as well as from the point of tourism, and they're very well connected to the automation. Okay, so with the same thread, I will continue how the industry perspective looking to be. Thank you. Next one. Yeah, next please. Yeah, if you look at this, we know we talked about all the new norm, what is going to happen. Work from home, it is normal. Today I'm attending this session from home only, not from my workplace. There is going to be low travel. There is going to be very clearly the remote connect, the remote monitoring or the remote support. Social distance continues to happen in the industry, the outside, or any of the event when we go out. Safety and security of the people, the process, our own installations are most important. There is going to be less and less of manual intervention in the process of what we do into the industry, starting from a security where I swipe my card or I get into, or I do the biometrics. I think you take every stage, there's going to be more and more. We expect less of manual intervention. We need for more for data access and the availability and the transparency of the data, because we are going to be leading a data-driven life across. And there is going to be high demand on the telecom as well as communication service provided in the allied industries. High demand, having said on the connectivity side, there is going to be less risk of the labor force availability, or even the shortage of very skilled labor also, or skilled resources also for us. So it relates to our urgent need for upskilling of our resources. It can be technical or non-technical. So I think that is where the collaboration between the industry and the universities takes a major role. Next slide, please. Okay, and we are seeing more and more. We have seen in the lockdown period also, which continues to be, there is a constant change in the customer buying behavior as well as the consumer buying behavior. When we talk B2B or B2C, there is going to be a drastic change in the way the customer buy or the consume. There is going to be a new supply chain demands or the supply chain management, the way we are doing today. More and more adoption of automation, and people who are already started with their digital transformation, as earlier presentation we saw, who enabled the digital transformation, neither CEO nor CTO. It is COVID which is going to accelerate our digital transformation. Who are already there, they are going to definitely accelerate this. Data-driven services are moving towards more and more towards cloud or shared resources. And there is going to be a need of revisiting our own process needs in the industry. We are more and more moving towards lean or agile manufacturing. More and more use of AR and VR to learn, diagnose, and solve the issues. And go digital, we need to build on our competencies and address our service needs. I think that's going to be the norm of the day when it comes to all the industries. It can be small, it can be corporate, of any size, or it can be a discrete manufacturing or a process manufacturing. That is going to be the life of the day. Thank you. Next one, please. Industry spread. If you look at the industry within India, we have 20 districts, which has industry segment. I am given only some samples. We have automotive in Pune, Manesar, Chennai, Bangalore, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, and even in our own Ahmedabad, Gujarat state itself. Pharma, Ahmedabad, Hyderabad, Baddi, Hyderabad, spread across multiple states. FMCG is much more widespread than any other industry. We are agricultural driven economy. We have agri produce like rice, wheat, pulse, condiments, or any consumable which we have. It is wide range and across, it is about wide scale also across India. It's available at various places. And look at the multi-commodity e-fulfillment center. We have Amazon, the Big Basket, Flipkart, to name few. They are also located at different places. Even they are going for high-end automation right now, which was more, lot of labor work is involved. Now they are moving towards more and more automation even for e-fulfillment. There are about 90 districts which are intense in all above those activities. And they're all impacted during the COVID period. And there was multiple districts which were not really impacted, but they cannot balance out the economic impact which caused by the COVID-19 spread in last 2-3 months. Next slide, please. So what is going to be the driver for our industry perspective on an immediate outlook and future? Companies will look more and more for conserving the cash. Having hard cash is most important, nothing other than hard cash. They need to monetize their inventories, whatever the way, and conserve the cash. I think that is going to be the order of the day. Though we have so many companies in India having a very healthy debt equity ratio, but it will definitely go on conserve cash on immediate term. There is going to be cut on the fixed cost. They want to preserve it. When there is a low productivity or a low production or a low revenue, we need to optimize the cost, and there is going to be a high focus on cutting the fixed cost, rework in the supply chain, renegotiate the vendors or the whole supply chain ecosystem itself, retool our business needs to the new situation. Do I need to work the same way which I'm working now, or to what extent I'm going to change? I think that's going to be the main driver. And revisiting our own process or making some of the process itself as a redundant. That is not going to be needed now. That's going to be part of lean process. Agile workforce management, there might be less and less permanent employees, but more of a leased employees or a contractual employees or case specific or work specific work contract. Such labor force is going to coming up. It all depends on to what extent there is going to be labor law amended or reform going to happen on that one. Rebound strategy, we are going to live in a VUCA world. We were, now it's going to be more intense with more volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. That's going to be the order of the day. Then next question comes, do I need to invest everything from my side? It needs to be capitalized, or I can have a shared resources. I think this is going to be order of the day, where we have the fixed resources. There is going to be shared resources being offered in a segment or a cluster. Next slide, please. So as a driver for automation, if you look at the typical journey starts when we start moving from current state to the automation, there is going to be review of the process itself. Before I embark a journey on digital transformation, I will look at how is my process? Are there any redundancies? Can I remove the wastages? Remove manual intervention or reduce the manual intervention? I look on both on the discrete automation as well as the continuous process automation. Establish machine connectivity. When I can establish machine connectivity, when my machines are ready with a smart, are enabled to be smart enough with the devices on those machines. Next step, go on, evaluate, do I need to deploy the robotics? I think they are the evolution which is going to take shape, then finally to the digitalization. How do I look at my digital readiness? Do I have enough ready system installed for data access? What is my data consumption plan? What are the interfaces I need? Am I going to have a connected factory or a complete interconnected plants across the different cities or different geographies? And Internet of Things, industrial Internet of Things, and self-regulated process. These are going to be a typical journey for our industries coming in the days. Many are already on this journey. It's a question of how mature, how well they are already ahead of this curve on the digital transformation. Next one, please. If you look at today's technology, even very old machine what we have in a discrete manufacturing, we can automate, we can make it as a smart by putting some sensors. To the new system of new machineries, which are high-end cutting-edge technologies, they are already very well automated. So that is how this is going to be a shift. I can modernize whatever installations I have, or whatever I buy, I'm going to buy high-tech, though there is going to be a demand on the investment, but definitely it's going to be a future-proof when you invest on such assets. Next one, please. So this is the host of our solutions, what we have from the house of, even as a training partner, as mentioned by Mr. Darji right now, we have the sensor where we have the devices from a shop floor all the way to the cloud, even making a very old machine to be smart by putting some sensors, then having some automation, machine level, to the plant level, the shop level, then the interconnected factories, having the robotics, IoT gateways. It is not that we work only into the electronics or automation side. Even very conventional technologies like hydraulic power pack, they are getting smart. They are becoming intelligent. They are becoming like self-aware and system-aware to respond suitably to be part of predictive diagnostics and the digital transformation. Next one, please. So this is how we look at actually as a whole portfolio. When you look at the shop floor, bottommost slide, when you see there, we have a sensors and actuators, controls and drives, automation equipment, servo motors, servo drives, where they generate huge amount of data. As it go up the line, the curve to the machine level, the gateways, then all the way to the cloud, where the data gets translated into a readable, actionable data. You get the dashboard on which you are going to act on it. I think this is the journey which it is with COVID or without COVID. This would have been the journey for India, but the COVID has accelerated this. I think many industries will go in this direction. And being a well partner for Gujarat University, we continue to partner with them, support the students, train the students, bring them up to date on these new technologies coming up, make them ready for industry absorption. I think that's continue to happen with GTU. Next one, but most important slide. Transformation is a process. It is not an event. We have embarked on a digital transformation. Interim, it is going to be automation. I think that's going to be an ongoing process. It is not just an event. With that said, I'm available for some more time to have any questions, anything, please let me know. Thank you very much for all the organizers for giving this platform. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your, again, very practical, industry-based and valuable insight. I think, yes, when we talk about the industrialization or, the inputs, or rather, the practical approaches in the industry, so the inputs from a company like Bosch would be definitely having its own significant. So yes, with this, definitely you have obviously, very briefly but precisely, pointed out how the industries are going to work in maybe, the next era post-COVID. So thank you very much for your insight. And yes, our we can say collaboration as a university with you will be definitely going ahead, and with your full support, the university is committed to, we can say, train the future employees of this economy. That is our students. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So now with this, let me move to the next speaker, Professor Sheetal. Yes, Dr. Sheetar, as I said, she is based at Portugal, heading very important department, that is, School of Economics and Management at University of Portuguese University. And yes, as I said, Professor Sheetal is also connected to us. So basically, the basic advantage is what, like, she is having some Indian origin. She has spent her professional life in Europe, as well as I think Mozambique too, and still she is connected with GTU, so she know the academic perspective and of the Indian universities. So with this, she will be speaking on the topic, that is COVID-19, what next for SMEs in Europe. So I think, for us also, being seated in India, it will be very interesting to know your, observation. Please, madam, over to you.
Thank you. I'd like to start by saying it is both an honor and a pleasure to be participating in this event today. So I'd like to thank GTU for this invitation, and obviously a special thanks to you, Professor Kiur, and also to the whole PhD team. I'd like to greet the honorable guest speakers and thank them for their valuable insights that they've shared today, and also extend these greetings to the expert panel members, which is a privilege to be part of today. Last but not least, to all students and faculty that have joined us at this webinar today. My topic, as was already explained, relates essentially to challenges that small and medium enterprises are facing. If you like, it's a bit what's next for these firms. I will try and be quite brief in order to comply with the timetable of this event. SMEs, as we all know, play a major role in most economies, particularly in developing economies. SMEs account for the majority of the businesses done worldwide and are important contributors both to job creation as well as to economic development. For the data that's been released by the World Bank, these firms represent 90% of all businesses and more than 50% of employment worldwide. In a recent article by the McKinsey Journal, released in the beginning of May, they refer to these firms, these small and medium enterprises, as being the grounds from where entrepreneurs, innovation, competition, all these are sourced from. Therefore, these are essential and key contributors to the development of all our economies. Additionally, these firms not only are the suppliers, but also consumers on the broader economy, but are quite embedded in their local communities, which means that they also play an important social role amongst their local community. So what's been happening? As we all know, and our honorable guest speakers have enlightened us also to some of these aspects, the coronavirus pandemic is causing a large scale, both loss of lives, but also a huge human suffering globally. It is by far the largest public health crisis that we've witnessed or in our memory, and is beginning to generate probably one of the most major or vital economic crises that we'll probably witness. So adopting a more macro perspective, if you like, and basing myself on the OECD data, which points that the pandemic effects on the economy are huge, no doubt, but on the SMEs and from this macro perspective, we can have an analysis both from a supply and a demand side. On the supply side, we are witnessing that these firms are experiencing a reduction in the supply of labor, because workers are not well, they need to look after their children and other dependents that are staying home. There is a lack of movement, so movements have been closed. This all relates to issues that that guests and experts have already referred to regarding lockdowns and quarantines. And this has implied severe loss in capacity in these firms. Additionally, these firms have witnessed, like others, interruptions in their supply chain, okay? On the other side, if we take a perspective from the demand side, we have also witnessed a drastic and sudden loss of demand, which is obviously implicated and in terms of revenue of these firms, causing affecting severely, if you like, the ability of these firms to function. One of the key aspects that has been referred is the liquidity shortages. Furthermore, consumers have experienced loss of income, which also is important for these firms, because these consumers are, from one side, have the fear of contagion, of being contaminated by the virus, but also this uncertainty that the whole environment right now is the environment that we are right now, which means that the consumers tend to reduce their spending and reduce their consumption. So all these defects compounded also because workers are being laid off and the firms are not being able in part to pay their salaries, at least not fully. All this is implied that there are repercussions that are quite deep in these firms. Okay? Obviously, as has been referred by some of the experts of the panel, there are SMEs that are more vulnerable, specifically those that operate in sectors like tourism, transportation. But until we don't get back the confidence of the consumers, and that's something I believe in Europe, but also worldwide, governments are working on. Until we don't get back the consumer confidence, it will be more difficult for these firms and others to get back to their growing rates. The effects that are happening on the economies worldwide are affecting all firms, not just SMEs, of course. But SMEs are specifically or more severely affected, if you like, given on the one hand their vulnerability, and on the other hand, their lower resilience, which is related also to their size. And I'm not just talking about revenue size and labor size, but also in terms of capital. These SMEs usually have a limited number of suppliers. This can be a positive in the sense that some of these firms are not so dependent on, for instance, China, because they use local logistics and local networks of suppliers. On the other hand, given the reduction, obviously, of global demand, this has also reflected on the reduction of revenue of these firms. Just to give you some ideas, Greece has witnessed a fall in 60%. Belgium has witnessed a fall in 40% of the SMEs that have registered, or better, in Belgium, 40% of the SMEs that have registered fall in revenue, this fall has been more than 75%. So we're talking about numbers that are in very, very, very big. This impact is particular in specific sectors, like I mentioned before, and like other experts have mentioned before me, such as tourism. For instance, in the case of Portugal, tourism is a strategic sector for the economy, and it has literally shut down for over 2 months. Coupled to all these difficulties that I've explained, we have the question relating to finance. Indeed, these firms, SMEs, traditionally have some difficulty or have very low cash buffers. Which means that they are at a greater risk of not being able to survive this harsh economic crisis. Just to give you some numbers, in the UK, just under 70% of SMEs have referred that they already experience a cash flow problem. Also, the jobs, given that the SMEs, as I mentioned before, are closely linked to their social networks, to the community networks, nonetheless, lots of these firms have had to put some jobs at risk. A recent study by McKinsey shows that there's an impact of this pandemic in Europe, that at least 2 out of 3 jobs are at risk in SMEs in Europe. So, and then we have those firms that will not survive, i.e. the end of the line will be now for many of these firms. Bankruptcies, are right now on the rise in Europe and globally. For instance, Netherlands has been reporting a rise in bankruptcies in April 2020 in comparison to the year before, more than 36%. And this is primarily in the retail and the hospitality segments. So given this scenario, given these direct impacts that we have witnessed, what kind of support are these firms getting right now? In fact, in Europe, and again, worldwide, this is happening across the globe, but in Europe, the EU and other organizations have been taking a very active stance in deploying measures to support these firms and also to support self-employed businessmen. This is in order to what? In a way to help sustain initiatives that help sustain short-term liquidity, but also initiatives that help defend or maintain the working force. Several countries have introduced measures relating to work times shortening or temporary layoffs or sick leaves. For instance, in Portugal, there's been a simplified layoff regime for lots of firms that have had repercussions in terms of lowering their revenue due to the negative impacts of the pandemic. Additionally, Portugal, Italy, and Spain, to name just a few, have temporarily suspended all mortgage payments for first-time house buyers, including self-employed, also to give some oxygen, if you like, to families and households. Additionally, in order to ease the liquidity constraints that these firms, as I mentioned before, have, many countries have introduced measures that allow for the deferral of tax and social security payments, and also other utility payments. Other countries have been able even to go a step forward and awarded subsidies and grants to some of these firms. I'll give you some examples, like in Germany, it's one of the countries that's been able to give a higher fiscal impulse in comparison to other EU countries. Spain, for instance, has introduced a 400 million euro credit line to help those affected in sectors such as tourism and transport. Additionally, countries are putting into place structural policies to help SMEs adopt new working methods, including digital technologies. This issue has been already presented by previous experts, and this to me seems like the cornerstone for these companies and others to move forward. We have witnessed in the short term a higher use of teleworking because of the circumstances we are in, and there is a need to increase and address these issues, both in a way to strengthen the resilience of the SMEs, but also to support their future growth. Because indeed, this growth will only be able to happen if there is a clear investment in these technologies, undoubtedly. So we come to the question of, okay, so what's next for these firms? What are the challenges that are facing these firms moving forward? Okay. Undoubtedly, we have on the one hand, market headwinds, technological disruption, we have finite access to capital, and all this is making it a bit more difficult to run these firms, as Forbes even recently pointed out in an article they published last week. So basically, we have the first key aspect, which is related to technology and technology readiness. As we know, these firms are critical for global economy. However, as the World Economic Forum has pointed out, these firms are losing ground in the fourth industrial revolution. So although the SMEs contribute to employment creation worldwide, they are not stepping up, if you like, and not being able to take the same pace in terms of technological change. At this moment, the World Economic Forum has launched a paper and a methodology that aims to help policymakers to aid SMEs to address this challenge, which is the accelerating the impact of industrial Internet of Things in small and medium-sized enterprises, a protocol for action. For those of you who want to have a look, you'll be able to access this in the site. Also, many SMEs are finding it hard to adopt telemarketing, new sales channels, other digital solutions, and all this will help mitigate the outbreak and containment measures. Some examples of countries that have invested in this is, for instance, in Austria, we have the Digital Team Austria, which is an initiative which helps companies digitalize their industry and offers digital solutions for SMEs free of charge for at least 3 months. We also have seen fintechs step up and start aiding another of the issues that I mentioned before, start aiding financing these firms. And a good example of this is Latvia, that we've witnessed this momentum. Other than the technology, we have the other aspect, which is an aspect that we already had in the era before coronavirus, so before COVID, which is the innovation. In other words, business will never go back to what was. What we had before COVID was, if you like, BC. Now we're going to have to look beyond COVID or after COVID. So the idea of we will go back to what we were doing, we will go back to our old ways, this will not happen, or it will not happen for firms that want to be successful and want to keep on growing. these firms will need to find new ways to reinvent themselves and their businesses. Innovation needs to be that cornerstone for firms that want to grow, want to survive, and want to strive. So in this logic, we have found some countries in Europe, for instance, Portugal, but also Denmark, that have started to fund startups. Usually these startups are the starting point, if you like, of the future SMEs. As mentioned by McKinsey, as I mentioned before, they're usually a good ground for entrepreneurship, new ideas. Also, we have witnessed in Europe lots of programs to develop skills and training and reinforce other skills that will be important going forward. This is specifically important in sectors that are very affected, like mentioned by the professors before me, like tourism, which will need to reinvent the way it interacts also with its clients. Last but not least, and in speaking of tourism and specifically of Portugal, the confidence of the consumer is the third aspect, which is essential that these firms regain if they want to start reselling or selling their products and getting back to the revenues they were used to. In Portugal, for instance, the Turismo de Portugal, which is the organization for tourism in Portugal, has defined what they call a clean and safe seal, which has already been started to be implemented, which allows for tourists to have a greater security and sense of confidence in the use of accommodations, of establishments, of hotels, of tourist attractions. So I believe that these kinds of measures will be witnessing these kinds of measures across the economic board, obviously applied to the different industries. I'd like to conclude by reinforcing that small and medium enterprises are the backbone of our economies, of our world economy. There is a long journey ahead, no doubt, but keeping in mind joint efforts made by governments, the efforts that are being made by central banks, obviously the key roles that business leaders are playing, but also consumers across the globe, I believe we should be hopeful that our SMEs in Europe and worldwide will be able to weather this storm if they keep on tackling the key strategic challenges that I mentioned with the right focus and the right financial backing. Thank you very much, and I'm available for any questions, ideas, or suggestions you might have.
Thank you, Professor Seetal. That's very true that, your last concluding remark that, the entire economy of the world, in fact, is based on the small and medium scale enterprises. And yes, Gujarat as well as India rather, we are also like, hub of SMEs, and majority of the, or rather a significant, contribution for SMEs are there in the national GDP. So I think your inputs would be definitely, helpful for our students, for the faculties, and even for few of the friends who are from the industry. I hope that many of them are from the SMEs too. So this is great to have your inputs. And yes, with this now the formal sessions on the 4 different topics are concluded. So I hope that now if anyone in the audience have some question or some observation to say, it is now open for 5 minutes for question answer session. So the audience are invited, anybody from audience is invited to have the question or answer, and we are open for next 5 minutes for that.
Can I come in?
Yes, who is there? Yeah.
I'm Trupti.
Yes, Trupti madam. So
good evening to all of you. My pleasure meeting Violeta madam, Professor Love, Rosita madam, and Stenila madam, everybody from Bulgaria. My pleasure meeting all of you. My question to all these elite speakers, that throughout the conversations we have been talking about shifts in economical perspectives, in technological perspectives. Partially also we dealt with legal and structural perspectives. I would like to know a little bit about the internal people processes that must also make a shift or take a shift when we're talking of leadership, when we're talking of skilling. What are those people processes that will also take a shift in the post-COVID era to make businesses successful? Anybody can help me with an answer or guide me on this.
Well, I talked about leadership, and I think that
Yes.
really there needs to be a change in direction, because this crisis is showing that there are serious moral problems in large businesses. I mean, we're seeing this in Europe. So, and it's a difficult issue because, you know, leadership comes from the top. So there needs to be a
Yes.
willingness for the people there to change an approach. But I think that this crisis, because it's so severe and it's going to be for some time, many of these people in charge of companies might be forced to reconsider their style. I think that it will be, it won't be, probably it won't be a very smooth process, but they'll be forced in the future. I mean, there's some studies which are showing before the crisis that about 2/3 of the North American workforce feels disengaged to the point that turns up to work only for the paycheck. And the results are slightly better for Western Europe. So going out of this crisis with demoralized workforce, it's not going to happen. Difficult issues, you know, I don't have a framework for that.
Thank you, Violina, madam. We will have to really explore new people processes to help encounter these challenges. Yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, madam. Thank you.
Can I include? I think that it is more a social experiment rather than a crisis, because people were forced to social distances, to study from home, to work from home, and it is affecting the life of people more than just a health issue, because people are forced to change their way of living, their way of working, and some of the people are infected because we are all in this social experiment. Some people like me and I believe that there is no such a virus. So this is more economic war rather than a health crisis. You see that all the companies are affected. Hospitality in Bulgaria and in all the countries are strongly affected because they were not prepared for such way of working. Most of the restaurants are closing their facilities, or they are forcing to work distant. It changed our way of living, it changed our way of thinking, and it is affecting also the leadership style, as Violina is telling. But there are businesses who are prepared and who will continue to develop. These are the IT companies, which are becoming stronger and stronger. The pharmaceutical industry is going to more and more developing this vaccine for this virus, if it's anything at all. But most of all, it is affecting people's life, because most of all, we're social human beings, and in order to survive, people are going to focus on creativity nowadays. And the leaders who are more creative will succeed. This is my opinion.
Yeah. So thank you, Professor Selvina, Professor Trupti, and now because we have another scheduled webinar just after this, so yes, I need to just now conclude our webinar here with. So again, with this, thank you very much for all the experts. Professor Violina, Professor Stanislav, Mr. Virupakshapa, as well as Professor Sheetal for your valuable input. A very special thanks. I must thank my colleague at PUM, Christina, for the wholehearted support and for making this joint webinar possible. So thank you very much, Christina, for your very active role in this. And all the participants who are either our students, our faculties, and the industry people who have joined us. So actually, looking at the setup of WebEx, we have allowed few people to join in the WebEx, and there are I think more than 600 participants who are live on the Facebook as we have got the registration. So thank you very much all, and here we conclude the webinar. Thank you very much all again. Have a
Thank
good
you
day.
very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you.